Hey everyone, welcome to my latest episode. In this episode, we're going to go through the concept about publishing. We all know that if you want to share a Power BI report, one of the most important way to share it is through the Power BI service. If you want to use the Power BI service, which involves a publishing activity. So let's get started. So if we start from scratch, see what's going on is we need to first define the environment. So there's several environments for us to do different tasks. The biggest environment is your local places. Let's just say this is a local environment. Most of the time, this is going to be a session where you open a Power BI desktop or the PBIX file. When you open that, is on your local drive. For example, you have one file. This file is something called sales PBIX. So this is the one binary file that's saved on your local drive. Take up some space and it's ready to be shared with others. When I say share, I mean publish that to a workspace. The workspace is another environment, which we say is a cloud environment. Let's just copy this object. So this will be the Power BI. Service, or we say platform will be more related. Under this platform, one of the most important things existing in the platform is containers. What is container? Container just workspace that we just mentioned. So within the platform, you have many workspaces. So for this, we may say this is the sales workspace. And you may have other workspaces as well. For example, marketing. Why you have different workspaces? Because project somehow they are not related. It's better to manage in their own spaces or domain. Workspace provide a physical boundary or provide a hurdle to the data that you try to share. So for our situation, the sales is more like a sales domain. So what we normally do is publish this into a sales workspace. So in the sales workspace, there's several things that we need to understand is the activity of your publishing. You know that when you open this file in your local environment, there's a button in the Power BI saying publish. If you click that button, then it will let you to pick a workspace to publish. You can pick sales or marketing. In this case, we're going to pick the sales workspace, right? So what happened is when you publish this to here, let's just say if this is the path, in Workspace, you'll see two things. So let's copy that over. You'll see two things. First, you'll see a report file, and then you'll also see a model file. Okay, these two things will be published into this workspace. So what happened here is PBIX file, like I mentioned before, is a binary file, compressed binary file. What is a compressed binary file? You can rename this extension into zip. You can unzip it. There's several things inside that zip file. That's why it's a binary compressed. And when it's released to or published to the workspace, the true nature, the true content of this binary file has been correctly been displayed. Basically, if you do that unzip in local environment for the PBIX, rename that into zip and unzip it, you will acquire two most important folders. One is the report folder, the other one is the model folder. That's the thing that you publish to the workspace. Actually, in here, the publishing activity involves, so we click the publish button, it will unpack this binary file and also uncompress. Uncompress means that it's going to release something. That's why even your Power BI file is, like say, for example, 200 megabyte locally. When you open that, check the task manager, check your memory usage of your PC or laptop. You'll see normally your memory is going to use more than 200 gigabyte. The reason is the release. So it's actually when you open that, it's uncompress some memory already and leak that into your random access memory in your local environment. So that's why normally when you if you want like say a smooth, you should have more space on your RAM, because whenever a PBIX file is opened locally, it's going to need more space in your RAM to make sure the thing works properly. Same, likewise, when you publish that, the released memory going to be pushed into the cloud and form two objects. One is the report, the other one is the model. Why is it important to understand when you have a PBIX, when it's published, it's going to become in two objects. The reason is that each of them has a different access management. You can grant people access to the report, or you can grant access to the model. So each of them, if you right click, there will be a pop-up menu for you, say permission management or manage permission. So just be aware of that. And also we can make this situation even more complex that I say we may have a marketing workspace report. Which is based on the same data set that we're having for the sales. It's possible. So this means that a report disregards its location. It can use data set released in other workspaces. And this report is linked to that. So let's make that happen. Make this line. So this is actually what happened. So report is built on top of a model, and these two things are actually as one file locally. When you publish that, it's revealed its true face as two files, and each of the file you can download them locally again. In many cases you do this like say in a one direction way. You only publish from local to the workspace. Sometimes when you download this report, you got two options. For example, when you download that, they may have a pop-up say two options. One is option is ask you download full. The other option is download thin report. So download full means that they're still going to pack these two things together as one file, and you get one PBIX file. For example, this one. If you download that in that way, that's what you're going to get. Another thing to download is download thin report. That option normally say you want to download a report with live connection to the data model that published in the Power BI Workspace. So for the thin report, you will still get the same file. But this two, the size is very different. Let's discuss a little bit. If you download that for this file size, if it previously is 200 megabyte, it's gonna be 200. The reason being that because you download 4, it not only included the report but also the model. That's why it's 200. But in this case, this is not gonna be the 200. Reason that this is a thin report. Your data set or the model is saved in the cloud. Here is just a thin report, is a shell to connect to the cloud data source. That's why this report can be significantly reduced in size. This more likely to be 100 KB. This can be 200 megabyte. So this gave us a significant indication on how you should develop and let people use the report. For this, the reason you want to download the full is because more likely you want to have a full taste. You want to customize the model locally, because once it is downloaded in the full, you have full automation, which means everything is exposed to you. You can see how a measure is calculated. You can amend that, make a copy of that, do a diversion of anything. And basically this 200 megabyte is disconnected from the cloud. This one is different. You can do light touch, a little bit modification, but the underlying data set is linked to the model. So whenever you want to edit this, there will be a pop-up message saying you need to add as a local model first. So this is the thing that I want to tell you about this publishing. And another thing, let's back to some of the publishing activity here. We'll say that this file is, what do we say here, is 200 megabyte in the local environment. If, let's just make this larger. When this file is opened, for example, in your Power BI desktop, when it's open, if you monitor your RAM, we can see in the memory consumption part, there are two things. So the first thing is, what we talk about is the physical space. So in this case, the physical space is actually 200 megabyte. This pointing to this binary file, the actual size is 200 megabyte. So if you want to carry this from drive A to drive B, send this to the other person, the 200 megabyte always going to in the place and occupy the physical disk space. So the physical space is more talking about the disk space. But there's also another one this is for the storage. So the other one is what we call computing space. Computing space is a question mark. Why this computing is needed? So physical space is just a placeholder for your physical shape 200 megabyte. If this is less than 200 megabyte, you cannot save this one. So 200 megabyte is the physical space. Once you open the file, each visual, when you click something, the visual is interactively interact with your selection, right? That process is what we call computing. For example, you drag a measure into a visual, the visual display a number for you, and now you choose a different slicer, the visual update the figures. All the activity that I'm talking about right now is the computing. It's doing calculation on the fly based on the environment change. So it's very dynamic. For that happen, you need computing space. Computing space basically is your computer's RAM, random accessible memory. That's why in order to speed up computing, you need normally higher space more than your physical. So when you open that, this RAM can take up to 1 gigabyte. So take it for granted, like say 2 to 5 times of your physical space, because it need occupy space in your RAM, prepare for the calculation. And anything coming, it will calculate very quickly. That's why it seems like very responsive. So in order to this happen, this gonna keep occupying the space, no matter it's a disk space or computer, your RAM space. It'll keep using that until you close this PBIX file. And since our publishing activity is happened after you open the PBIX file, that's why it's very important for you to know for the publishing activity, this is not going to reduce because you still open the PBIX file, right? So make sure whenever you do publishing, my best practice, close as many tabs as possible, because there's going to be a noise to like say make disturbance of your publishing activity. When you open it, when you publishing it, it's going to release the memory and unpack the size. So 200 megabyte going to be loaded up into 1 gigabyte into 2 gigabyte. Is very possible. So in my experience, if a 2 gigabyte disk size PBIX file, when you open that, it's going to take up like say more than 10 gigabyte in your RAM. So think about that. Another thing is about what is factor to impact your local disk size. Here we say this is 200 megabyte, right? This one thing is called cardinality. Cardinality means that it's talking about the uniqueness of your data. We know that in a Power BI model, the most significant part of your model is, if we take this one out, this can be described in two things. The first thing is what we call report layer. Another is the model layer. So in order for PBIX to work properly, these two layers are the essential part. By the name, you probably already know what they're meaning, but let's just go through that again. For PBIX file that you develop locally, under the hood, there are actually two components, report layer and also the model layer. Report layer holds the definition about how a report is drafted in terms of the visual. How many pages, each page has which visual, and each visual has what kind of data field got involved. So that's the definition of the report layer. Likewise, if you open the VS Code, if you ever save that thing into PBIX project file, report layer is the definition about your page information, each page, what kind of visual you are having. So that's the report layer. For the model layer, which in term interchangeable, semantic model layer, it holds definition about your whole model. For example, this one, BIM file. It tells you each table, how it's connected to the data source, what kind of authentication is happening in this model, how the table is related to each other, which is a relationship, and each table has which columns. And each table contains what kind of measures. So those are things are essential for the definition of a model in the BIM file. That's why they hold different amount of information and the quality is different. This one, report, visual, how a report looks like. This is the backend, the engine actually. So normally this whole thing can take about very small spaces. For 200 size of disk, we'll see the file over here is pretty small. It's like a 100 KB. So most of your 200 can allocate to the model layer. Why is that? That's because in the model layer, there's another thing to mention is we know that the model layer holds, just copy that again, paste again. Model layer holds the definition, or we say it's the metadata of your model, how a model is structured. Every information that need to finish the structure of the model is in the definition. Another is the data. Because definition doesn't contain row level information. For example, if you're a sales report, you can define the sales report model by saying this sales report contains table X, Y, Z. For each of the table, they have this column, that column. You don't need to include the row information. For example, which order happened on which day. So the definition is defined shell, the body of the thing. Well, data is actually filling the soul, filling the actual weight to that body. So what happened is in your model layer, there's one folder is actually carry the weight of your model, which is the data. Flip back to the VS Code. It's actually located in this PBI folder. Normally there will be a file called ABK file. That file is the reason you are having this 200 megabyte. So what I'm saying is, as long as it's a definition happen not only in the model, but also to here. Let's do that. This definition things cost nothing normally. It's well under 1 megabyte. For most of the report that you can design in your lifetime, only this thing is that thing that can carry the weight. So 200 megabyte, this probably contribute more than 90% of that size. So why I talk about so many things that is so granular is because if you want to do the versioning, you also need to understand what has been versioned, what has been tracked. In our GitHub setup, this way, do you think everything is being tracked? But actually it's not. So tracked make happen on the text-based file. So all of this JSON, end of the day, is just different extension, but underline is just the text. That's why it's traceable. But for the data, it's different. Data is hard to trace because when you trace, you're thinking about change from change to change. But data, whenever you refresh, the underlying data is changed, but the data structure is not updated frequently. That's why whenever you update the data structure, adding a new column, dropping a new column, rename a new column, that kind of things is very easy to track. So we'll only track what is worth tracking. That's why in this structure, the PBIX folder structure file format, if you look at this one, it looks like this is not English word, but actually is two words called git ignore. If we click that, what does this does? Git means tracking. Git ignore is tracking ignore, which means you don't track the changes applied on those files. The first thing is local settings. Local setting is how you toggle your Power BI options, menus, settings, configurations. They don't track that. Another thing is the one that I talk about, the cache ABK file, which carry the actual weight of your model, of your report, which is this one. So your data refresh from time to time, you know there's a change, but that change is not tracked. What has been tracked is the definition of your report layer and definition of your model layer. So we grade this out. So this is one thing that I want to talk to, is that when you're doing the tracking, you just need to make sure you understand the logic behind that. So everything in the box will be tracked, but this is not. And also, if you want to track, you need to save that as PBIX. Okay, that's today's content. Hope it's helpful, and see you guys in